They give me the youngest class because the old ones who come back are good for two things, and I have already used up the first. The first is the body. A young Vorth at the War Hall of Drenox wants to see what a fleet does to a creature that has stood in front of one. They want the proof on the skin, so they look at me when I enter the tier hall and they find it. They find the seam that runs from my left brow down across the socket where the eye no longer sits true, the way the membrane has gone milk pale and does not track light. They find the hand that ends at the second knuckle on 3 fingers, and the way I keep it folded under the other so it does not draw the room. They find the slow walk, the cane I will not name a cane, the breath that catches on the third stair as if a hand still rests on my chest from inside. They look at all of it and they sit straighter, because a body like mine is the closest thing the Academy can offer them to the war they came here to learn, and they think the body is the lesson. It is not the lesson. The body is only the door. The second thing an old returned veteran is good for is the thing I am here to do, which is to stand in front of 100 cadets who believe the galaxy is a thing that can be conquered, and to take that belief away from them so cleanly that they never feel it leave. That is the work. The car ascendancy does not keep men like me alive out of mercy. It keeps us because a warning spoken by a man who has come back from the place the warning is about cannot be argued with, and the ascendancy needs a few of us in every generation, posted at the war halls, ready to be looked at. I have done this for 40 years. I am very good at it. I am telling you that so you understand that nothing I am about to set down is performance. I stopped performing a long time ago. This is the room. Stone, because Drenox is an old hall and the founders believed stone taught patience. Tiered seats rising in a half circle so that every cadet looks down at the speaking floor, which is a Vorth idea about authority that I have always thought was backward, because down there on the floor I am the one with my back to nothing, and they are the ones boxed in their rows. A high window on the eastern wall, and through it the gray of Drenox's permanent overcast, the home sky none of these children will see again for a long time once they ship. A lectern I do not use, and on the floor beside me, on a low plinth, under a dome of clouded field glass, a single object the cadets cannot make out from their seats and will spend the whole session trying to. I let them try. I always let them try. You came here, I tell them, to learn how to take a world. The ascendancy has 900 worlds. It took every one of them. You have been raised on the taking. Your fathers took and their fathers, and you have been told since you could stand that the Vorth do not ask for a thing they can hold instead. You believe this. You should believe it. It is true. I let that sit. They like it. It is what they came for. There is one exception, I say. One region of the chart your fathers did not take. One line the ascendancy drew and has never crossed in 9 generations. You have all heard the name the common people give it. Say it. A pause and then a voice from the third tier, a big one, a cadet who has clearly decided early that he will be the one who answers. The hush, instructor. The hush, I agree, and the formal designation. Silence. None of them have it because the formal name is not taught to children, only the common one, the frightened one. The Ulving Reach, I tell them. On every ascendancy chart for 9 generations, the Ulving Reach is bounded in a single unbroken line, and across that line there is no notation, no resource survey, no population estimate, no threat assessment, no fleet disposition, nothing. You have been trained your whole lives to read a chart, and you have never once stopped to ask why one region on every chart you have ever seen is blank. You did not ask because the blank was always there, the way the floor is always there. You stopped seeing it. That lands the way it always lands. A few of them go still in the particular way that means a child has just noticed something that was in front of them their whole life. Those are the ones I will reach. The rest are already telling themselves a story about how the blank is a clerical matter, a disputed border, a thing too small to matter to a hall full of future commanders. The Reach is not empty, I say. The Reach has a population. It has worlds, plural, a dense cluster, A great many people on a great many planets, more than any single Vorth holding. We know this. We have known it for 9 generations. We have left every line of it blank deliberately by standing order because the survivors of the one fleet that crossed that line came back without the words to fill it in. The big cadet, the one who answered, leans forward. One fleet, instructor. In 9 generations, only one fleet ever crossed. Only one, I say. Ours, mine. I was aboard it. I am the reason there is a man at this lectern instead of a recording. And I am going to tell you what happened to it, and when I am done some of you will understand why the line is drawn, and some of you will sit there and think you would have done it differently, and I cannot help the second kind. I have never been able to help the second kind. The reach helps them, eventually, if they are stubborn enough to make it that far. I would rather it were me. I moved to the plinth then. I always move to the plinth here because the timing is right, and because the object does the part of the work that words cannot reach. I do not lift the dome. I rest my ruined hand on the field glass and let them look at the shape under it that they still cannot resolve, and I begin. We called them many things before we crossed, and only one of those things after. Before, in the survey reports that reached the ascendancy in the early years, they were the reach population, a clerical phrase, a placeholder. Among the trader castes who had brushed the edge of their space without entering it, they were the changeable ones, because their ships came in shapes that did not repeat, because their hails arrived in tongues that bent to match the tongue you hailed them in, because no 2 accounts of them agreed. The scholars who studied the trader reports gave them a name out of an old Vorth root that meant a thing without a settled form, a thing that would not hold still long enough to be filed. And that is the name that stuck, and the name I will use, because it is the only one that was ever true. We called them the unfixed. You must understand what that word meant to a people like the Vorth. We are a species that conquers by category. This is not a boast, it is a method, and it is the method that built 900 worlds. When the ascendancy moves against a holding, the first thing it does is not to fight. The first thing it does is to know. We map the enemy. We learn his form, how he is built, where he is soft, what he breathes, how fast he heals, what frightens him, what his weapons throw, and how far. We file all of it. And once a thing is filed, it is, in the truest Vorth sense, already conquered, because a filed enemy is a solved problem, and the fleet that follows the file is only the hand that executes a victory the archivists already won. We have a saying, old as the founding, the chart wins the war. The fleet only collects it. This is why the blank in the reach was unbearable to us. Not the danger, the blank. A people who conquer by category cannot abide a thing that has no category, and the unfixed, by every report that reached us, were exactly that. They could not be filed. Every account contradicted every other. One trader swore they were small and pale and soft and breathed our air. Another swore they came armored in living metal that grew like bark. A third swore there was no body at all under the suit, only a shifting. The scholars assumed the traders were lying or mad or had each seen a different species, and confused them under one name. The simplest explanation, they said, was that the unfixed was not one people but several, and the changeability was an artifact of bad observation. The simplest explanation is usually correct. That is the first thing the reach taught me. The simplest explanation is usually correct, and the reach is the place where usually goes to die. The fleet that was sent to settle the matter was the 9th Talon, and it was sent because the ascendancy had decided, after 9 generations of leaving the blank alone, that the blank itself had become a danger. A region you cannot file is a region that can grow against you in the dark. Some other power might enter it, learn it, turn it. Better, the council reasoned, to enter it ourselves, file it at last, and either fold it into the ascendancy or seal it with knowledge instead of with ignorance. It was a sound argument. I believed it. I was 41 years old, a tier commander aboard the Talon's flag, and when the order came down, I felt the thing a young officer feels when the great blank of his childhood is finally to be filled, and his is the hand that fills it. I felt chosen. I want you to hear that I felt chosen, Because the ones of you who will not be reached by anything else might be reached by knowing that I sat where you sit and felt exactly what you feel now. The Talon was commanded by Marshal Dren Vole, and I will tell you about Vole because you need to understand that the fleet that died was not a foolish fleet. The Ascendancy does not give a marshal's baton to fools. Vole had taken 11 worlds across a 40-year career and lost none of them back. He was patient where patience won and savage where savagery won, and he had an instinct, which cannot be taught and which I have never had, for the exact moment a thing tips. He did not believe the traitor reports. He did not disbelieve them either. What he believed was the method. File the enemy, follow the file. He had done it 11 times. He intended to do it a 12th. When he briefed the tier commanders before the crossing, he stood in front of the great chart with the blank reach glowing at its center, and he said a thing I have repeated to 40 years of cadets and will repeat to you now, because it is the truest false thing a Vorth ever said. There is no such thing, Vole said, as a creature that cannot be filed. There is only a creature we have not yet observed correctly. We are going to observe it correctly, and then we are going to file it. And then it will belong to the chart, and the chart belongs to us. Every officer in that room believed him. I believed him most of all. We crossed the line on the 40th day out from the staging point, and I will tell you what crossing it was like because it was not like anything. There was no barrier. There was no challenge. The traitor reports had spoken of patrols at the edge of reach space, ships that watched and turned back hails, and we had braced for a contested border, the kind of approach where the enemy contests every parsec to buy time to file you in turn. There was none of that. We crossed the line our own charts drew, and on the far side there was only space, ordinary space, stars and dust and the long dark, and for 9 days nothing met us at all. That was the first wrongness, and Vole, to his credit, named it as a wrongness on the first day, not the 9th. A population that dense, he said, behind a border drawn in 9 generations of our own fear, does not leave its approaches unwatched. Either they have not noticed a war fleet entering their space, which is not credible, or they have noticed and have chosen to let us come, which is worse. He slowed the fleet. He sent forward the scouts. I want to tell you about the scouts, because the scouts are where the filing began to fail, and the failure of the filing is the whole of what I have to teach. A Vorth scout does not fight. A scout observes and files. We sent forward a screen of 9 of them, fast small ships crewed by our best observers, the men and women whose entire training is to look at a thing and know it. They spread ahead of the fleet across the dark, and for 2 days they sent back what scouts send back, which is the slow accumulation of category. World here, atmosphere thus, no orbital defense detected. World there, populated, energy signatures consistent with industry. A vessel sighted, here is its shape, here is its drive signature, here is its mass. Ordinary work. The blank beginning at last to fill. And then the files began to disagree with each other, and then they began to disagree with themselves. The first vessel the scouts sighted was filed by 2 of them at once, from 2 angles, as scouts are trained to do so that no single observation stands alone. One scout filed it as a slim courier, lightly built, fast, unarmed, fleeing inward to carry word of us. The other scout, looking at the same vessel at the same moment from 40 degrees off, filed it as a heavy thing, armored, slow, turning to face us. Both observers were certain. Both observers were among the best the Ascendancy had. The discrepancy was flag to the flag, and the flag did what a Vorth flag does with a discrepancy. It ordered the 2 scouts to converge, to look at the vessel together from close and resolve it. They converged. They looked at it together, and they filed, both of them, the same report, which was that the vessel was now a third thing, neither courier nor warship, and that it had not changed its course or its drive output in any way they could measure during the time it had taken them to converge. It had not transformed. There had been no moment of change to observe. It had simply been one thing and then been another, and the observers who had watched it the entire time could not say when the one had become the other, because there had been no when. The change had not happened in time. It had happened in the looking. I was on the flag bridge when that report came in. I remember the silence of the archivists, which is a particular silence, the silence of people whose entire art has just returned an answer their art forbids. An archivist can live with a frightening file. An archivist cannot live with a file that will not stay filed. Vole read the report twice. Then he ordered the scouts to disregard direct observation and to file the vessel by instrument alone, mass, energy, drive. Because instruments do not look, instruments measure, and a thing that fools the eye cannot fool a mass reading. The mass reading came back. The vessel had the mass of the courier and the armor of the warship and the drive of the third thing, all at once, in proportions that no single hull could hold, summing to a number that no vessel of that size could carry without collapsing into its own gravity. The instrument had not been fooled. The instrument had measured exactly. The thing simply was, by measurement, impossible, and went on existing anyway, unhurried, neither fleeing nor turning, while 9 of the best observers in the ascendancy watched it be impossible, and could do nothing but write the impossibility down. Vole ordered the scouts back. That was the correct order. I have spent 40 years going over every order Vole gave inside the Reach, looking for the wrong one, the one that, had he given its opposite, would have brought the Talon home, and I will tell you now so you do not wait for it. There is no such order. Every order Vole gave was the order a master of the method should give. Recall the scouts when observation fails. Slow the fleet when the approach is unguarded. Tighten the formation when the enemy will not resolve. He did all of it in the right sequence at the right moment, with the instinct that had taken 11 worlds. And it did not matter, because the method assumes a thing the Reach does not contain. The method assumes that the enemy has a form, and that the form, once found, stays found. The unfixed have no form that stays. You cannot file a thing whose every property is a temporary courtesy. The scouts came back, 8 of them. The 9th we lost, and I will tell you how we lost it, because it is the second thing the Reach taught me, and it is worse than the first. The 9th scout did not come back, because the 9th scout could not find the fleet. Its navigator filed in his last clear transmission that the star he was using as his return mark, a bright blue giant we had all marked on the way in, a landmark you could not mistake, was no longer where it had been, and that when he steered for the place it had been, he found the fleet's recorded position empty, and when he steered for the fleet's actual signal, he found himself steering away from it, the range opening when it should have closed. He was not lost in the ordinary way, the way a scout gets lost when his instruments fail. His instruments were perfect. The space itself had stopped agreeing to hold still. The route he had flown in on was no longer the route out. The path behind him had become a different path while he flew it, and every correction he made was a correction toward a place that moved when he corrected, so that the harder he tried to come home, the further home receded, not because he was failing to navigate, but because the thing he was navigating through had ceased to be a thing that navigation describes. His last transmission was not a distress call. Our observers do not panic. It is trained out of them. His last transmission was a file. He filed what was happening to him, calmly, completely, in the proper format, the way he had been trained, so that the data would not be lost even if he was. The last line of the last file from the 9th Scout, which I have carried in my head for 40 years and which I will give to you exactly, was this: correction increases error. The way back is not behind me. Recommend the fleet hold position and file the following. The route is part of them. Ending transmission to conserve. I am not afraid. Tell the hall I was not afraid. He knew. At the end, alone, he understood the whole of it before any of the rest of us did, and he used his last clear words not to beg but to file, and to ask that the hall be told he was not afraid. I have told the hall. I tell it now. He was not afraid. He was the best of us, and the Reach took him first because the best of us was the one who understood soonest, and understanding the Reach does not save you. It is only the price of admission to the thing the rest of us were about to learn slower and at greater cost. The root is part of them. You will not understand that line yet. I did not understand it for a long time, and I had the rest of the Talon's death to teach me. So let me give you the rest. When the scout's last file reached the flag, Vol did the thing the method demands, and the thing that I now believe was the moment, if there was a moment, though I have told you I do not think there was. He ordered the fleet to turn. Not to flee, Vol never used the word, and I do not think he felt it. He ordered a withdrawal to the line, a controlled return to the boundary to regroup, to bring the impossible files back to the Council, to fill the blank with the one true thing we had learned, which was that the blank could not be filled by a fleet and should be filled instead by the standing order it now carries. It was the right decision. It was, I have come to believe, the only right decision a Vorth could have made, and it was 9 days too late, not because Vol was slow, but because the decision to withdraw assumed there was a behind to withdraw to, and the 9th Scout had already filed the truth that there was not. We turned. 406 vessels of the 9th Talon came about as one, the great slow wheel of a Vorth fleet under a marshal who has decided, and we set our course back along the route we had flown in on, the route every navigator in the fleet had recorded to the decimal, the route that was supposed to be the surest thing in the entire operation, because we had just flown it, and nothing flies a route more surely than a fleet flying its own wake. And the route was not there. I will not tell you it had been erased, because erased is a thing that happens to a record, and the route was not a record, the route was space, and space does not erase. I will tell you instead what the navigators reported, which is that every mark they had set on the way in was still exactly where they had set it, and that flying from mark to mark in the reverse of the order they had set them no longer led to the line. The blue giant was where it had been. The dust lane was where it had been. The dead system with the 3 cold moons was where it had been, every landmark held. And the fleet flew from the blue giant to the dust lane to the dead system, in the exact reverse of the inbound order, every navigator confirming every mark, and arrived not at the line but deeper, further in, the reach thickening around us, the stars growing strange, as though the marks themselves had agreed to lie in unison, as though the path we had recorded had, while we held position to recall a scout, quietly rearranged what it connected to. The route is part of them. The way in was a way they had let us have. The way out was a way they had not. Now, I am going to stop the account here in the deep of the reach, with 406 ships flying their own recorded wake into ground that keeps getting deeper, because this is the place where the cadets always interrupt me, and you have been good. You have held your questions a long time, and I owe you the question. It always comes from the same kind of cadet. It came, the first year I taught, from a boy in the frontier, and it has come every year since, and it came again today from the big one, the one who answered first, the one who is already certain he would have done it differently. He stood, they are not supposed to stand, I let him. Instructor, he said, with respect, you are describing trickery, sensor ghosts, navigational deception. Every people we have ever conquered tried to deceive our instruments, and our instruments are the best in the galaxy, and we conquered them anyway. You are telling me a fleet of 400 ships could not find its way out of a region it had just flown into. I do not believe a fleet of 400 ships could be lied to that completely. Somewhere in 400 ships there is a navigator who is right. You find him, you follow him, you go home. What you are describing is not impossible. It is only hard, and the Vorth do hard. I want you to know that I love that cadet. I love him every year. He is the best of them and the worst of them in the same breath, and he is the entire reason the line on the chart has to be a line and not a footnote, because he is the one who reads a footnote and thinks it is a dare. I did not argue with him. You cannot argue a man like that out of the thing that makes him the kind of man the ascendancy promotes. The Reach does not argue either. The Reach agrees with him. That is the horror of it. The Reach agrees with everything you bring, and then it is the thing you brought, and then you are alone with it. So I did not argue. I asked him a question instead, the one I always ask. You are right, I told him. Somewhere in 400 ships there is a navigator who is right. So Vol thought too, so I thought. We did exactly what you said. We found the navigator who was right, a woman named Corin, the finest in the fleet, who had flown the inbound route herself and recorded every mark with her own hand. We put her on the flag. We gave her the fleet. We told her, take us home and disregard every order to the contrary because you alone are right. Do you want to know what Corin did? The cadet did not sit, but he did not speak either. He had heard the change in my voice. They always hear it here. She took us home, I said. She found the route, the true route, the one that led to the line. She was right. She had always been right. She brought 400 ships out of the deep of the reach along a course no instrument could fault, mark by mark, toward the boundary. And on the 9th day of her course, the lead ships of the Talon crossed back over the line into our own space, into filed space, into the chart that belongs to us, and they were not our ships. I let that sit longer than I let anything sit. They had our hull numbers, I said. They had our drive signatures. They answered our hails in the voices of our own officers. They crossed the line Corin had brought them to, exactly where she said it would be, exactly on the course she flew, and the relief flotilla the Ascendancy had waiting at the boundary, because the Ascendancy is not foolish. It had a flotilla waiting. The relief flotilla looked at the ships of the 9th Talon coming home and filed them, by instrument and by eye, as something that was wearing the 9th Talon. Not disguised as, not imitating. Wearing it the way you would wear a coat taken off a body, the shape correct down to the hull stress fractures and the burn scars of the inbound crossing, the file perfect in every field, and underneath the file, a mass reading that summed again to the impossible. Corin had been right about the route. The route was right. The route had always been right. The route was part of them, and she had navigated us, flawlessly, down the inside of the thing, and delivered to our own border 400 ships that were now the reach reaching across the line in the shape of our own returning fleet. The flotilla did the only thing it could do. It is the standing order, written after the Talon and never once relaxed, and every officer at the boundary knows it. Nothing crosses out of the reach. Nothing. Not a ship, not a hail, not a returning hero, not your own brother's voice on the channel begging you by a childhood name only he could know. Nothing crosses out because the one time something tried, it was wearing 400 ships, and if the flotilla had let it pass to be sure, to be merciful, to file it properly before deciding, there would be no line on the chart today and no ascendancy to draw it. The flotilla held the line. The thing wearing the 9th Talon was met at the boundary and was not allowed across, and what happened there is the one part of this account I will not give you in detail, not because it is secret but because there is nothing in it for you to learn, only a thing for you to carry, and I have carried it so that you do not have to. The line held. That is all you need. The line held. And on the inside of it, 400 ships worth of something that had been my fleet was turned back into the dark, and the blank on the chart got its standing order, written in the blood of the men who held the boundary against the faces of their own. And now you will ask me the last question, the one the big cadet has not asked yet but is going to, the one every year asks, the question my whole posting exists to answer. You will ask me how I am here. If nothing crosses out of the reach, if the line held against 400 ships wearing the faces of the fleet, if the standing order is that not even a returning hero is led across, then how is there a Vorth at this lectern who says he was aboard the 9th Talon? How did I cross out, when the fleet I crossed with was turned back at the boundary as the thing it had become? I am going to answer it, and then I am going to lift the dome off the plinth, and you are going to see the object, and the two of those together are the whole lesson, and after that there is nothing more I can teach you, and the reach will have to teach the rest to whichever of you walks toward it anyway. I did not come out with the Talon. I came out before. Vol sent me out before the route turned, before Corin, before the deep, on the day the scouts came back disagreeing with themselves, when the discrepancy was still only a discrepancy and not yet a grave. He sent one fast ship back to the line with the early files, The disagreeing scout reports the impossible mass readings, the first wrongness, because that is the method too. When you encounter a thing that may break the fleet, you send the knowledge home ahead of the fleet, so that even if the fleet is lost, the knowledge is not. The chart wins the war. Vole believed that to the end. He sent the knowledge home, and I was the officer he put on the ship that carried it, because I was a tier commander he could spare, and because, he told me, a thing this strange should be carried by a man who would be believed, and I was, in those days, a man who was believed. I flew the route out on the first day before it had become part of them, while the way back was still the way back. I crossed the line with the early files in my hold, and I delivered them to the council, and the council read the impossible mass readings and the disagreeing scouts, and they understood, faster than the fleet could, that the blank was not a thing to be filled by ships. They drew the line. They wrote the order. They sealed the reach with knowledge instead of ignorance, exactly as Vole had argued the operation should end, except that Vole had imagined ending it with a filled chart and a folded territory. And what actually filled the chart was the single word the reach had taught us, written across the Ulving reach on every chart since, and taught to no child until he is old enough to command. Do not. So I am a survivor by a day, by the accident of being the man Vole chose to carry the early word. I have asked myself every day for 40 years whether that is luck or whether it is the other thing, and I want to give you the other thing now, because it is the second half of the lesson, and the cadet who would do it differently needs it more than he needs anything else I have said. I told you the route was a way they let us have. I told you the way in was theirs to give, and the way out was theirs to keep. Listen to me now. I do not think I escaped the reach. I think the reach let me out. I think a fleet that can wear 400 ships and walk them to our border in the shape of our returning heroes does not lose one fast courier on the first day by oversight. I think they read the method off us the way we read the form off an enemy, file the vorth, follow the file, and they understood, faster than we understood them, that a people who conquer by category will not be stopped by being beaten. A beaten vorth fleet is a tragedy and an outrage, and a thing the ascendancy answers with a larger fleet. They did not want to be answered with a larger fleet. They wanted to be left alone. And the only thing in the galaxy that makes the vorth leave a blank on the chart and never fill it is not a defeat. It is a warning the vorth cannot disbelieve. So they let one ship out, on the first day. With the early files, the disagreeing scouts, the impossible mass, the first taste of the wrongness, exactly enough to terrify the council into drawing the line, and not one fact more than that. They did not let me out because they missed me. They let me out because I was the warning, and a warning that comes home is worth more to them than a fleet that does not. I have spent 40 years being the thing they sent. Do you understand? I am their work, not ours. The line on the chart is not the ascendancy's decision. It is the unfixed decision, executed by the ascendancy, carried across the line in the hold of a courier they chose to release, spoken now in a stone hall by an old man they made, and have never once needed to touch again. They beat us so gently that we have guarded their border for them for 9 generations and called it our own caution. That is what a thing that becomes whatever stops it does to a people who conquer by category. It does not destroy the category. It becomes the category, and then the category guards it, and the people who built the category never feel the hand turn them. Now I lift the dome. The thing on the plinth is small. It is a fragment of hull plate, no larger than a vorth hand, recovered from the boundary after the talon was turned back. One of the only physical pieces of the thing that wore my fleet, secured under field glass by the archivists of the War Hall, because it is the single object in the ascendancy that does what the whole reach does in miniature, where a cadet can watch it. I rest my ruined hand beside it, and I tell the cadets to look, all of them, to look closely and to file it, to do the one thing they have been trained their whole lives to do, which is to know a thing by looking at it. And they look, and they cannot. The fragment will not hold a form. Watch it long enough and the alloy is plate steel, gray and burned and fractured along the lines our own hulls fracture along. Look away and back and it is something else, something with a grain like wood that grew, something with a sheen like the inside of a shell, something that has the burn scar in a place the burn scar was not. Two cadets describing it to each other will describe two different objects, and each will be certain the other is mistaken. Put an instrument to it, and the Warhol has every year for 40 years, and the instrument returns a mass that does not match the volume, a composition that lists elements in proportions that cannot coexist, a reading that is exactly precise and exactly impossible, the way the scout's vessel was, the way the fleet that wore my fleet was. It is a chip of the Reach, and it sits in a stone hall in the heart of the Ascendancy under glass, and it will not be filed, and that is the lesson, that is the whole lesson, that everything I have said for the last hour is only the long way of bringing you to this hand-sized thing that proves it. There exists in the galaxy a kind of being that has no form for you to find, no weapon profile to learn, no escape to deny it, because it is not a thing that stays a thing. It is a thing that becomes. And the route you flew in on, the wake you trust most, the line behind you that you have flown 1,000 times and would stake your life on finding in the dark, that is exactly the thing it will become, when it decides you have come far enough, and you will steer for home with a perfect navigator on a flawless course, and you will arrive carrying it in your own shape across the only line that ever kept it out. The big cadet sat down at last. He did not have anything to say. They never do after the dome. Some of them will never speak of it again and will spend 40 years guarding a line they now believe in down to their marrow. And some of them, one or two in every class, and I have learned to see which, sat there looking at the chip under the glass with a light in the eye that the chip itself put there. The light of a man who has just been shown the one blank left on the chart and has heard, under everything I said, only the word unfilled. I cannot reach those ones. I never could. I send them out with the rest, and the Reach gets the few of them that are stubborn enough to make it that far. And it does to them, slowly and personally, the thing it did to 400 ships, and it does not need me to help. I covered the chip. I sent them to their tiers. The session was over and the gray of the home sky was going to the darker gray that passes for night on Drenox, and I stood alone on the speaking floor a while, the way I do, with my ruined hand resting on the field glass over the thing that will not hold still. There is one more thing, and I do not put it in the lecture, and I am putting it here only because a record should be complete, and I am old and the records I leave are the last warnings I have left to send. On the first day, flying out of the Reach with the early files before the route was theirs, while the way back was still the way back, I passed close to one of their worlds, closer than the scouts had been. I was running fast and quiet for the line, and my course took me through the outer reach of a populated system, and for a few minutes I had one of their worlds large in my forward glass, a living world, blue and clouded and turning, and on the dark side of it the lights of a great many people who did not know or did not care that a Vorth courier was fleeing past them with their death warrant in his hold. I looked at that world the way an observer looks, the way I was trained, trying to file it, trying to know it. And I could not because it shifted. The world held perfectly still. It was the most ordinary world I have ever seen, blue and clouded and lit, and I could not file it because there was nothing wrong with it at all. And a thing with nothing wrong with it is the one thing the Reach had not prepared me for. I had braced against the shifting. I had not braced against the stillness. They let me see one of their worlds at peace, turning in its own light, full of people going about an evening, and they let me carry that home too, alongside the terror, and I think now it was the crueler half of the gift. Because the terror keeps the line drawn, but the stillness is what keeps me awake. I saw the thing the galaxy fears most in all the universe sitting quiet in its own light, harming no one, asking nothing, and I understood that we were never the danger to them and they were never going to be the danger to us, and that the whole of the line on the chart, the 9 generations of it, the 400 ships, my ruined hand, the chip under the glass, all of it exists because a people who conquer by category could not leave alone the one people in the galaxy who simply wished to be left. and who were strong enough and strange enough to teach us to leave them by becoming the only teacher a Vorth cannot doubt. Do not strike them, not because you would lose, though you would. Strike them and you will not be allowed the clean thing, the defeat, the loss you could carry home and answer. Strike them and the way you came will not be the way you leave. You will run for the line you know with the truest navigator in your fleet, and the line will be where she says it is, and you will cross it wearing your own hull, in your own voice, with your own dead carried home in your own shape. And the men who love you will hold the boundary against your face and weep while they do it. And the chart will gain 1 more inch of blank. And an old officer they have not even made yet will stand in a stone hall a generation from now and tell children who feel chosen the thing I am telling you, which is the only true thing I learned in the only war I ever lost. There is no road out of them. They are the road. Whatever you flee down, they have already become. That is the lesson. The hall is yours, carry it.